So for our final panel of the day, we are going to welcome back Maya Lang of Sick Cells. She'll be joined by Andy Elner of, Dr. Andy Elner, Dr. Kim Smith-Whitley, and Wally Smith, who's joining us again virtually. This panel will be on a solution-oriented conversation on breaking down barriers. Maya?
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for joining us this afternoon. It's been a wonderful conference, and I'm excited to close with us talking about ways that we can overcome barriers to clinical trials. On a high note, we started with talking about the therapeutic landscape and clinical trials. We've heard from patient educators around navigating. We've heard from individuals that have participated in clinical trials, and we've talked about policy implications as it relates to the development around therapeutics. What we hope for in this conference is for warriors, for families, to be able to walk away feeling that they can take action around participation in clinical trials and understanding what the therapeutic landscape is that's available to them. Earlier, I had asked Dr. Campbell from a provider's perspective, what is it that providers can do to help educate the patient population around what's available to them? We know, I think you guys both know, that the language between the warrior community, the clinical community, the provider community, the industry, all varies. Our hope in this conversation is to talk in plain language, very simplistically, around how people can get involved with what's available to them today. So let's start with this first question. Practically, how does one find clinical trials and how do they participate in it? Who would like to start?
I can start. One of the things I think is so important is to set the context. And I believe that all of us are looking for care that is high quality, that is safe, but also respectful and compassionate. And a lot of that has to do with shared decision-making between your healthcare team and you as an individual, your family, and your community. And in that context, I think that the discussions become open about what you need in your healthcare and then also what your objectives are in life. So it's healthy living, but it's also healthy living in a way that you can achieve your goals. And so I think that in the context of great healthcare that's respectful and compassionate with a team that believes in shared decision-making, you can actually talk to that team about what trials are currently available. You can also speak to your community, because I believe community-based organizations are an incredible vital resource. And so you can actually reach out to that community-based organization, or you can actively search on your own. And we've heard today about some of the challenges around searching on your own. Clinicaltrials.gov is not an easy website to navigate. I know that they're working on some changes for that website, but that can be a challenge. There is a clinical trial finder through the Sickle Cell Disease Association of America that I just want everybody to be aware of, that allows you not only to go and find trials that are open in your area, but also it educates about sickle cell and clinical trials through that site. But I really believe that the way that most individuals find out about trials is by being in a medical environment that includes community, where you either hear about it from your team or from a community member or from someone else living with sickle cell disease or their families.
Thank you.
I can build on that a bit. First, Maya, thanks so much. And Ashley, this is a wonderful conference. It's really an honor to be here. I'm not a hematologist by background. I'm actually a primary care doctor and have worked my whole career around access to care, essentially. And so when I just really would underscore what Kim said, I do think for a disease as complex as sickle cell disease, you really need an expert involved in the care to help you navigate some of the difficult decisions. I think we heard these different treatment options over today between gene therapy, between some of the new pills that are available. And I think there's a lot of things we can do to help provide more information to the entire patient community. I think it's going to be important to have an expert in the loop. And when you look across the country, I think we're all aware of the fact that a very large proportion of the sickle cell community doesn't live anywhere near an expert. And there's only, especially in the adult sickle cell community, there's only recently sort of evolving expertise in the field. People like Dr. Smith and others are training providers to extend access. And so one of the things that we've been thinking a lot about is how do you connect as many patients as possible with the best care? Technology may have a role to play, especially in areas and parts of the country where there just aren't experts. And so how do we help people? I think part of connecting people to clinical trials and understanding their options is connecting them to experts like the two doctors I'm privileged to be on the panel today. And then I think there's other things we can do also to educate people in addition to that. But I think the first step is you got to be working with someone who really knows what they're doing.
And I want to add to that, avoid misinformation. There is a lot of misinformation out in the web and on Snapchat and Instagram and other places, pro and con of various therapeutic options. And so you have, just like you are careful about what you consume with regard to your car management, your home buying, and any other consumer decision you're making, you need to be careful about the sources of information that you decide to use in order to make decisions about your health. And I want to point up that we don't have an ability to judge sources of information on the internet with regard to clinical trials the way that most of us would like, consumers reports or something like that. So we're stuck with this hard to navigate NIH clinical trials website, clinicaltrials.gov, as the probably good housekeeping seal of approval website, but it's not easy to navigate. So I would say combine what you get from something like clinicaltrials.gov with advice of experts. You don't have to enter a clinical trial in your hometown. You can go to another town, another state even, for some of these clinical trials and enter in. So I'm thinking about gene therapy in particular. You can go to another state and be involved in a clinical trial. But if you live in a certain state and you find out about it on clinicaltrials.gov, you need to have somebody you can talk to and get a reliable opinion. Maybe that's your physician locally, or maybe it's even the physician in the other state that's running the trial. So it's a combination of methods. And yes, I think it's okay to talk to patients. I just want to make sure that when you talk to patients, they're giving you objective data, not an opinion based on my auntie's uncle's experience in some hospital somewhere.
Thank you. Dr. Smith, you kind of led us right into my next question. And as you mentioned, leveraging platforms like social media where people are able to readily access information. And I think what you're highlighting is the fact that social media is much easier to navigate than clinicaltrials.gov. And people are looking for platforms that they can gather information. So building on that, what might self-advocacy look like when you have individuals who are seeking solutions? What are some suggestions on constructive paths? And you talked a little bit about that, but if we could all spend a little bit more talking about self-advocacy in clinical trials.
Going back to what Kim said a minute ago, what do you want out of life? Do you want pain relief? Do you want increased energy? Are you looking to take a stab at something that's risky in order to have a radically different life? What is it that you want out of life? And then start with that as your parameters for deciding which trials you will or won't take. I'm fond of showing a 2x2 table that has risk on one axis and reward on the other. You ought to be able to take a giant risk to get a giant reward. If you only want a small reward, you should not take a big risk. That's a general statement I'm making. And so another point I would make is the older you are, the more likely you are to already have some organ damage and things that you cannot reverse, and show your expectations from being involved in a clinical trial might be lower than that of somebody who's 10, 15 years of age and their organs are still perky, and they are, taking a giant risk in order to keep them perky. This is the sort of thing that, you can discuss with an expert, but you could discuss it with your family too. They can sort of talk to you about, okay, you've done okay all your life, but now it looks like things are getting worse. A lot of times that's when patients come in to me and say, okay, I'm interested in the clinical trial now. My life suddenly is getting worse.
And Wally, I agree with everything you said. I think that I cannot not say this in this room. One of the incredible powers of sickle cell is this community. And one of the things that I think, if you are contemplating a clinical trial and you're sitting in front of your computer and you put in sickle cell clinical trial, your age, I did it this morning, and it comes up through AI on Google with a list of different websites that you can go to. But what is sobering is Sick Cell's website doesn't get listed, SCDAA doesn't get listed. So there's some things that are missing still in that isolation, sitting from your couch, making this type of decision. So just as much as I would say I'm an advocate for including the healthcare team, I'm really an advocate of including the community. And I know that the organizations represented in this room have webinars, have networking opportunities where individuals living with sickle cell disease can get opinions about clinical trials and experiences. And I encourage people to do that. I also then encourage people to bring those questions back to their healthcare team, right? And I think it is that not just bidirectionality, but just going back and forth is an iterative process until you get enough information that you feel comfortable. Okay, these are my options. These are the things that I'm primarily looking for. And does this trial fulfill that?
Yeah, Andy, I was going to go to you, and I know you probably have something to contribute. I just want to add even more to that. From your vantage point, we're touching a little bit on the barriers. I oftentimes don't like to spend too much time there because I want to be really optimistic about what the future holds. But if you could share a little bit more just around what you see around what some of the barriers are in this access to clinical trials.
Yeah, I think one thing I would bring in is the fragmentation, not just in the care that people experience, unless they're a small percentage of people are lucky enough, especially in the pediatric setting, to be in the care, at a true center of excellence with all the information is on one electronic health record. It's all, you've built something amazing at your institution that gives a really holistic, accurate data picture of what's going on in the patient. The vast majority of patients don't have that luxury, especially when they're transitioning from childhood to adult. And so I think what we have in this country is it's an intersection of very fragmented care, especially for people with really complex conditions, where they're often needing to be seen at multiple different institutions that have silos of data and information. And so I think it's sort of the intersection of fragmented care and fragmented data. And when you're someone with a lifelong condition that has a lot of complexity and just, people develop as you know, tens of thousands of pages of medical records where you actually to print it out. And historically, we haven't had good information systems that help us sort of see the signal to the noise. That I think is going to be when you step away from that and you try to say, how do I know what trials this patient qualifies for, let alone also just what's the best care that they can receive? You need really accurate data. And so we can hopefully transition at some point to talking about solutions, because I do think that there's reason to have a lot of hope around this. But I think it's one of the things, this fragmentation has created such inefficiency in getting treatments through clinical trials and to market. And so I think it's one of the big barriers we need to overcome.
Dr. Smith, I know that you're having conversations with patients just around these trade-offs and participation in clinical trials. Andy's highlighting kind of what some of the barriers are with the fragmentation. In your conversations with patients, how are you helping them navigate this fragmentation in order to make these informed decisions around participation?
Iteratively, repeatedly, using sources other than the doctor. Patients walk out of most medical care encounters going, what did he say? And they need somebody to help reiterate, filter, interpret, break down, like you said, language that everybody understands. The doctors, we talk in doctorese. And so they need somebody to do that. Now, Kim's going to laugh because I'm going to talk about community health workers. Community health workers are a bridge to taking what the doctors mean to say to a patient and turning it into language that patients actually understand, and vice versa, fielding questions that patients dare not ask for fear of looking ignorant in front of a doctor, and then taking those questions to the doctor to get an answer back. So you need a family member in the room with you, an advocate in the room with you, and if you have somebody in the community in a community-based organization, or in our case, working on the staff of the medical center, you need a community health worker to help you bridge and navigate some of these systems, understand what it is that is available to you, not just for your clinical trials, but for all of your care. And Kim, you may want to talk about what we learned from our studies earlier.
Wally, you couldn't have brought this up in a better context. One of the things that we are demonstrating in multiple ways is the power of a community health worker. And we've had community health workers that have now been through specialized training for the sickle cell space, right? So we know that there are opportunities through organizations to not only get the written and the classroom-based approach, but shadowing with other community health workers to develop skills. I know that, we just had our study, Wally, that looked at transition from pediatric to adult focused care, our PCORI-based study out of CHOP, where we were looking at a mobile app compared to a community health worker. And we're about to publish those results, but spoiler alert, I think everybody knows that community health workers are powerful. And if you do that with a mobile app, it is even stronger.
That's what I was going to say. I think you want both.
You do. You want both.
And Andy and I had this
Wally, I just want to say that the other piece of this in navigating this space, I can't iterate enough because it's been brought up repeatedly today, that having individuals living with a condition participate in every step of the research process is critical.
Okay.
And we just actually published studies where we have the patient as the first author.
Okay.
And the patient has gone to the conferences, to ASH, to present the information. So I want to think about this in full circle and really encourage our organizations to challenge all of us to not only get things out into literature, but in publications that people can understand. Plain language summaries are so critical. So I think the next challenge of the next generation is how to get that in front of individuals to help them with decision making. And that's where I look at Andy, because I think that, you have an incredible opportunity to do that.
I think we do together. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think it builds on the shoulders of incredible work that's been done. And I think both Kim and Wally have been leaders. I'd say if you look historically we've designed so much of medical care and so much medical research around doctors, basically, and hospitals and visits. And I think pioneers like you both have started to see how you almost flip that paradigm and say, how do we build this around the patient? How do we build this with a team where different members of the team are empowered to do the things that, community health workers, others, that they can do better than the doctor? Do they have the tools to do it? How do we start taking care out of the clinic into the community? How do we take it out of visits, make it more proactive, continuous? And I think technology has a role to play, but so does the team. And so does the sort of this, it's a different culture to how you would deliver the service. And one of the things that's inspiring about the work that both of you have done, and I think we're starting to see really pioneered in the expert sickle cell community, is bringing care and research closer together. Yeah. So how do we start making the enrollment in clinical trials, surfacing opportunities to patients, a part of a routine care? And I think the next step that I'm excited to do together is starting to bring that out of visits, out of, you see me once a year and I will, I'll tell you the first time about a trial that you might qualify for. And if you come back in 3 months, let's talk again about it. I think we can dramatically accelerate that by just using technology, designing teams differently, and starting to surface opportunities to people outside more proactively based on data.
I do want to brag on Andy though, because it's physicians like Andy, software CEOs like Andy, that will make the difference. It would be a whole lot different if somebody who couldn't spell SCD were trying to push a product off on the patients and have it be vanilla, one size fits all, not thinking about the patient's needs. And what Andy's doing is trying to do a needs assessment and see, how do I start with the patient and work my way back to the doctor, serving the patient first. I think that kind of software tool will always win. If the patient gets anything out of it, they're going to start putting more data into it. They're going to start using it more. If you throw it at them and say, here, give me some data, they're not going to give you a damn thing.
You have to help people accomplish something they're trying to accomplish. It's not just, as Wally said, it's not just give me your data, I'll figure out how to make money on it. Basically, if you think about a patient, what does someone want? They want a holistic opportunity. They want to connect with the best providers. Often they want just basic things, help with accessing basic resources, things like that. And so I think too often technology solutions end up being they're point solutions. They're very narrow and they're not focused on the whole experience. And so, when we started looking into what technology could we build, it was really clear to us that it has to be done taking advantage of this whole ecosystem. There's an incredible ecosystem here already. And it's centers of excellence. It's amazing organizations like Sick Cells, but like community-based organizations across the country. And a lot of what we've thought about is, technology has a role to play. It's not going to solve this by itself or even close. But if technology could help to connect these incredible resources that you all have built over decades, then I think we can accelerate, access to much better care and treatment.
And then can I just add one more thing, because I think it's just that connection. And it's not just in the decision to participate. It's during the trial. And I think one of the things that we don't address when we're talking to individuals about clinical trial participation is what happens to me if I get sick.
Yeah.
And to me, that is what you really want to discuss. How am I going to be able to access the medical team? Are you going to be able to tell me if I really need to know, if the doctor's taking care of me, really need to know, am I on a sugar pill or placebo, or am I getting the medication? What happens to me if things don't go according to plan? And that connectivity, I think, is really important to maintain. And I think we need to incorporate that into respectful, compassionate clinical research so that individuals know that they can connect not only to and inform, a team that can provide information for them, but actually take care of them and connect to their primary team.
Kim, I want to make one other point going back to what you said about, it's really struck me today about you saying, well, what is it you want out of life? What if we had a clinical trial system that asked enough patients that question and designed outcome variables around what patients say they want out of life? Would that might maybe create a whole new clinical trials organizational framework and a revaluation framework? I want that day to come.
Us thinking about the art of the possible, some things are coming to mind. Yesterday, I participated in a sickle cell discussion, and they highlighted how at one point in the sickle cell journey, there were many voices advocating to the hill. Sick Cells has been an organization to help unify the voice in advancing policy. Today, we're talking about therapeutics and therapeutic innovation, access to clinical trials. And Andy will be shameless. Jasmine's sitting in the audience, but these two individuals are thinking creatively around access to clinical trials. And what we're talking about is unifying in a common problem and aligning individuals with the forward thinking to help solve that problem. And as a community coming together to inform what that solution needs to look like. As people are watching and they're thinking about barriers and access to clinical trials, our hope is that when people walk out of this conference, they're able to start to navigate what this looks like today. I think the other ask here is for us to continuously be able to hear what their needs are and being able to overcome those barriers and co-create these solutions together. And all of the individuals that have been brought into this conference today, I think, are allies in our desire to solution and close gaps for the sickle cell community. With that being said, I want us to have some closing remarks here. And so as we close out the conference, our final panel, I want to thank everyone that's participated today. And I'm going to ask the same question that I ask of others. What is the closing salient point that you want people to walk away from today with when they think about overcoming barriers to clinical trials?
Do we only have 15 seconds? I'll just really quickly, I think one of, at least for me initially, one of the non-obvious things is it's basically around data access and being able to have a unified record or unified picture of a patient's medical history that's validated, that's essentially enables rapid matching to trials. And I think we're in a moment, I was really inspired, had already been inspired before, but even more so today, about the incredible biomedical innovation that's happened over the last couple decades. One of the things that in my world is really exciting in digital health is there was a bill passed in 2016 called the 21st Century Cures Act that's finally coming, sort of the teeth of it are finally coming into play. And essentially it gives any patient the right to pull their data from any electronic health record or hospital system they've been a part of. And that literally goes into effect in about 6 weeks. And it just creates, I would say, again, Kim built this incredible system at CHOP. and I think that we just need to figure out how to give everyone access to that level of extraordinary data that unlocks the potential to much more efficiently help people access the right treatments and the right trials. And so I think it's a really cool moment for all of that.
I think that it is really marrying high quality, respectful, compassionate care to high quality, respectful, compassionate research. And I know we can do it through allyship and also through living this experience through the patient caregiver focus. I think that that's going to be our promise for the future.
And I would say knowledge is power. Knowledge is power. You cannot participate in a trial that you don't know about. So you need to have your ear to the ground. You need to have your ear to the providers that you're taking care of. It's not on TV yet, but we're getting close. Some of these trials actually get advertised in high profile places. And you need to go to that hard to navigate clinicaltrials.gov and type in sickle and see what the hell comes up and say, what does this mean? Even if you can't interpret it, but knowledge is power.
We may even together be able to build an even better solution that is more personalized to people and just helps them find exactly the right solution for them.
Absolutely. Thank you all for your participation today. And with that, are we opening the floor or are we wrapping? We are wrapping. So thank you all.